The morning I found out my life was a lie began like any other Tuesday. I woke to the smell of coffee brewing downstairs, the faint hum of NPR drifting up from the kitchen radio. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, painting stripes across Laura's empty side of the bed. Her pillow still held the ghost of her perfume, something floral, expensive, a gift from her boss last Christmas. Funny how little things stick to your ribs once you start paying attention. I found her at the kitchen table, scrolling through emails on her phone, her brow furrowed in that way it always was before her 7:30 a.m. Zoom calls. She glanced up, offering a distracted smile. "Morning, Tom. Coffee's fresh." "Thanks," I said, pouring a mug. The silence between us felt heavier than usual, but maybe I was imagining it. We've been married 27 years. Silence was just part of the furniture now. Our son, Ethan, bounded into the room next, his college hoodie swallowing his lanky frame. At 19, he'd shot up 6 inches in 2 years, all elbows and knees and a mop of chestnut hair that never stayed combed. My hair was sandy once before the gray. I caught myself thinking, Laura's is still blonde. Where'd he get the chestnut? "Big exam today, Dad," he said, grabbing a Pop-Tart. "Bioethics. Wish me luck." I clapped his shoulder. "You'll crush it. You're a fighter." He grinned, that lopsided smirk I'd seen in 1,000 Little League photos. My boy. Always would be, no matter what some lab report said. But let's rewind. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been cleaning out the garage when I found the shoebox. Laura's handwriting on the lid. Memories, Ethan. Inside, baby clothes, hospital bracelets, a lock of hair. And at the bottom, a photo of her holding newborn Ethan in the delivery room. Her face was radiant, exhausted, terrified. Beside her stood Richard, her CEO, his hand on her shoulder. "He drove me to the hospital when you were stuck in traffic," she'd explained later, too quickly. "You remember that storm?" I did. A November downpour, gridlock on a 95. By the time I'd skidded into the maternity ward, Ethan was swaddled and sleeping, Richard already gone. Hand on her shoulder. Chestnut hair. That company retreat in Napa, 2 months before Ethan was conceived. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. Then I ordered the DNA kit. The package arrived on that Tuesday afternoon, a discreet white box nestled between Ethan's Amazon subscription protein powder and Laura's New Yorker. My hand shook as I sliced it open. Inside, 2 cotton swabs, a consent form, instructions in 6 languages. "What's that?" Ethan asked, materializing in the doorway with his laundry basket. "A ancestry thing," I lied. "Your mom's been nagging me to do it." He squinted at the box. "Cool. Maybe we're related to Vikings." I waited until he'd thudded upstairs before swabbing my cheek. The second swab took longer. I found Ethan's toothbrush in the bathroom, the bristles still damp. This is insane, I thought. You're violating his privacy, your wife's trust. But the photo in his shoebox burned behind my eyes. The lab took 10 days. 10 days of jumping every time my phone buzzed, of studying Ethan's face as we grilled burgers on the patio, of watching Laura laugh with Richard during her evening Zoom check-ins. "He's just a workaholic, like me," she'd say when I asked about the late nights. "You know how startups are." Then, at 2:17 p.m. on a rain-slick Thursday, the email arrived. "Results ready." I clicked the link in the parking lot of Ethan's community college. Windshield wipers slapping time. The page loaded slowly. Biological father, 0% match. Rain blurred the world outside. Somewhere, Ethan was sitting in Philosophy 101, doodling in margins, alive because of a man who wasn't me. Inside, I felt a nothing. Then everything. When I got home, Laura's Mercedes was in the driveway. Early. She stood at the living room window, her reflection hovering over the backyard where Ethan had learned to ride a bike, where he'd hosted his graduation party. "Tom," she said, not turning around. "We need to talk." Her voice cracked on the last word. In the glass, I saw she was holding the lab results. Laura's hands were steady as she placed the lab report on the coffee table. The paper trembled anyway, caught in a draft from the open window. Outside, the oak tree we'd planted when Ethan turned 5 lashed its branches against the slate-gray sky. A storm was coming. Or maybe it had already arrived. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just stood there, spine straight as a courtroom defendant, her eyes fixed on the backyard. "How long have you known?" I sank into the armchair, the leather creaking under me like an old joke. 3 weeks since I found the photo. A flicker of confusion, then recognition. Her shoulders dropped an inch. The one from the hospital. You never told me he was there. You never asked. The words hung between us, sharp as the lightning that split the sky. Thunder rumbled in the distance. I thought of our wedding day, July 12, 1997. Outdoor ceremony, rain clouds circling. Laura had laughed as her aunt fussed with a hairspray can. Let it pour, she'd said. We'll dance in the mud. Now, she looked like she'd forgotten how to dance. It was one time, she said finally. Her voice was quiet, frayed at the edges. The Napa retreat. You just lost your job. We weren't talking much. I flinched. That year came back in fragments. Layoffs at the plant, nights spent staring at classified ads, Laura picking up extra shifts at the startup. Richard's startup. You slept with him to get a promotion? No, her head snapped toward me, eyes blazing. It wasn't. I didn't plan it. We were sharing a cab after the dinner, and he listened. Actually listened. She pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling something between a sob and a laugh. Pathetic, right? 27 years, and that's all it took. The rain started then, fat drops pelting the roof. I wanted to hate her. Wanted to smash the framed family photos lining the mantel. Instead, I noticed how her engagement ring caught the lamplight, a modest diamond, bought when I was still a foreman with overtime pay. She'd never upgraded it, even after Richard made her VP. Why didn't you tell me? My throat felt lined with sand. When Ethan was born, when he got sick at 8, when he existed. Laura moved then, perching on the arm of my chair. Close enough to touch. She didn't. At first, I wasn't sure. By the time I knew, you were already his father. Really his father. Her hand hovered over mine. You taught him to throw a curveball. Helped him write that awful middle school rap about mitochondria. You think DNA changes any of that? Outside, Ethan's Jeep crunched into the driveway. We both froze. Mom? Dad? He burst through the front door soaked, backpack slung over one shoulder. Who left the garden hose on? The whole side yard's a... He stopped, sensing the weather indoors. Everything okay? Laura stood smoothly, the way she did in board meetings when clients got hostile. Your father's got a migraine. We were just debating aspirin versus Excedrin. Ethan squinted at me. You look like hell, Dad. Flattery'll get you nowhere, I croaked. How'd the bioethics test go? He launched into a rant about utilitarianism while Laura fetched towels. Watching them, her tucking a towel around his shoulders, him ducking playfully, I felt the lie lodge deeper into my ribs. This is still your family, some stubborn part of me insisted. Just rearranged. After Ethan retreated to his room, Laura poured 2 fingers of bourbon into her tea mug. We'll tell him together. When you're ready. And Richard. Her knuckles whitened around the mug. He doesn't know. Never wanted kids. Bitter smile. Turns out he got one anyway. We sat in the darkening living room, nursing drinks we didn't taste. I thought the first night we brought Ethan home, how he panicked when he wouldn't stop crying, how Laura sang Sweet Baby James off-key until dawn. My son. Hers. Ours. I need time, I said at last. She nodded. Take the cabin. Fish. Think. Just come back to us, Tom. Upstairs, Ethan's laughter spilled through the floorboards, a YouTube video probably. Laura reached for my hand. I let her. The storm passed. The oak tree stood. The cabin smelled like pine sap and forgotten summers. I bought the place in '03, back when Laura was pregnant with Ethan, and we dreamed of weekends teaching him to fish. Now, 20 years later, the dock sagged. The porch screens buzzed with trapped flies, and the only thing I was teaching myself was how to outrun the truth. I didn't fish, didn't unpack, just sat on the lumpy plaid couch and stared at the moose head mounted above the fireplace, its glass eyes judging me, same as always. Laura's voice replayed in my head, come back to us. But who are us now? Nightfall brought a cold front. I built a fire the way my dad taught me, crisscrossing logs, kindling tucked like a bird's nest. Ethan had loved this ritual. At 10, he'd solemnly declared himself fire marshal, arranging sticks with military precision. Safety first, Dad, he'd say, parroting some YouTube survivalist. The whiskey bottle beside me was half empty when my phone buzzed. Ethan, Mom says you are recharging. You good? I stared at the screen. He'd added a gif of a sloth hanging upside down. My thumbs hovered. Me just needed some quiet. How's the bioethics grade? Ethan, a dash. Prof said my take on paternal consent was bold. Oh. The fire popped. Embers spiraled upward, casting shadows that looked like accusatory fingers. Paternal consent. I woke at dawn to the sound of loons. The lake was still, mist clinging to its surface like gauze. For a wild second, I considered driving home. Then I saw the tackle box on the counter. Its lid rusted shut. It took 20 minutes to pry it open. Inside, Ethan's first fishing rod, a collapsible Spider-Man thing he'd outgrown by 12. Beneath it, a photo of us on this dock, him holding up a sunfish half the size of his hand. We're having him for dinner, he crowed. We'd thrown it back. The rowboat was where I'd left it, overturned in the reeds. I righted it, spiderwebs tearing like old lace. The oars creaked as I paddled out, the lake sloshing rhythms I used to find calming. Today, it just sounded like white noise. I cast the line without bait. Let the hook sink. Watch the water distort my reflection. What I call him now? Not son. That word felt stolen. Not Ethan. Too generic for 19 years of bedtime stories and broken bones. The fish weren't biting. Good. Laura called on day 3. He's asking why you're really up there, she said. No hello. What did you tell him? Migraine relapse. A pause. He's too smart for that, Tom. A kingfisher dove nearby, a blue streak snapping the tension. I picture her in her home office, stress-chewing Nicorette despite quitting smoking, 8. I'm not ready, I said. I know. Her exhale crackled through the receiver. But he's still yours. In every way that matters. I watched the water, thinking of Ethan's first steps. How he'd wobbled toward me, arms outstretched, trusting I'd catch him. Did I? Tom, I'm here. Come home when you can. The dishwasher's leaking again. We both knew it wasn't about the dishwasher. Day 5, I tried to burn the DNA report. The flames licked the edges, then recoiled, too damp. I settled for drowning it in the lake. The ink bled, biological father, dissolving into Rorschach blots. That night, thunder rolled in. Rain drummed the roof as I dug out the VHS tapes from the closet. Ethan's 3rd birthday party flickered to life on the ancient TV. Me in a paper crown, Laura frosting smudged, Ethan blowing out candles with a dramatic wheeze. Make a wish, someone shouted. The tape ended. Static buzzed. I rewound it. Watched again. On the 7th morning, I found a note tucked under the tackle box. Dad fixed the dock. Don't kill yourself tripping. Hey. He'd driven up while I was asleep. Nailed fresh, planks over the rotted wood. Left a 6-pack of root beer in the fridge because he knew I didn't drink around him. I sat on the repaired dock, feet dangling where he'd once dangled his. The sunrise painted the lake peach gold, same color as the hospital blanket he'd been swaddled in. When the loons called, I finally cried. The highway home felt narrower than I remembered. I drove slow, windows down, the scent of cut grass mixing with diesel fumes. Every mile marker whispered the same question. What happens now? Laura's hydrangeas were blooming when I pulled into the driveway, their blue heads bowed under the noon sun. She stood in the kitchen window, phone pressed to her ear, VP mode. But her free hand rose in a hesitant wave. I lifted Ethan's root beer 6-pack like a peace offering. He found me in the garage later, oiling the hinges on his childhood bike. Thought you donated that, he said, leaning against the doorframe. Changed my mind. The training wheels were still on, rusted, comically small. Remember when you tried to jump it over the recycling bins? Broke my collarbone. He grinned, touching the spot. Mom made you sleep on the couch for a week. Because I dared suggest he walk it off. He grabbed a rag, started polishing the handlebars. The silence felt fragile, like thin ice. So he squirted WD-40 with surgical precision. You and Mom good? The question startled me. Not are you okay, but are you good? As if our marriage was a carburetor he could tune. Working on it. He nodded, adult in a way that hurt. Cool. We hung the bike from the rafters, its wheels spinning lazy circles. Shadows striped the concrete floor like prison bars. Dinner was Laura's attempt at my mother's pot roast. Oversalted, underseared, perfect. Ethan dissected campus drama between bites. This girl in my study group thinks Nietzsche was a Swiftie. Can you believe? His phone buzzed. A text lit up the screen. Hey, Boss Gene Jr., you free tonight? Laura dropped her fork. Ethan snorted. Relax, Mom. It's a joke. We're doing this parody TikTok about dominant versus recessive genes. He shoved his phone in my face. Check the hairline I gave you. The cartoon version of me had a receding hairline labeled RIP follicles. Laura's caricature clutched a briefcase screaming career drive gene activated. Accurate. I deadpanned. Ethan's laugh bounced off the china cabinet. But Laura's smile didn't reach her eyes. Later, I found her scrubbing an already cleaned sink. Moonlight through the window turned her hair silver. He doesn't know, she said to the suds. No. Are we monsters? The dish rag twisted in her hands. I remembered holding those hands in Lama's class, or crushing my fingers as the instructor droned about visualizing waves. I took the rag. We're scared. She leaned into me, forehead against my shoulder. We stood anchored there, the faucet dripping Morse code. Saturday morning, Ethan dragged us to his ultimate frisbee game. Mandatory attendance, he decreed. I need hecklers. We sat on bleachers hot enough to brand cattle. Laura shaded her eyes with a scorecard. Which one's ours again? Number 11. The show-off. He leapt for a catch, shirt riding up to reveal the scar from his appendectomy. I held his hand pre-op while he cracked nervous jokes. Across the field, he high-fived a teammate, a kid with Richard's build, Richard's cocky stance. Laura stiffened. You see it too, huh? Her nod was barely there. Every day, Ethan scored. The crowd hooped. We stood to cheer, Laura's pinky brushing mine. That night, I opened the safe. Birth certificate, social security card, the $2 bill from Ethan's first tooth fairy visit, and the DNA results, still damp at the edges. Ethan's voice floated downstairs. Gonna ace this genetics final, just watch. Floorboard creaked. Laura hovered in the doorway, holding 2 mugs. Decaf, she said. With that fake sugar you hate, we drank at the kitchen table, bitter and sweet. I want to tell him, I said. She traced her wedding band. When? After finals. The clock ticked. The fridge hummed. Somewhere a dog barked at nothing. She reached across the table. I took her hand. Ethan's finals week descended like a circus act, chaotic, colorful, and oddly performative. He transformed the dining room into a war room, taping biology diagrams to the walls and muttering about Punnett squares. Laura and I tiptoed around him, speaking in hushed tones as if studying were a sacred ritual. He's got your focus, I remarked one night, watching him stab a highlighter at a textbook. Laura froze mid-sip of wine. My stubbornness, you mean. The unspoken or Richard's lingered like static. On Wednesday, Laura came home smelling of bergamot and tension, Richard's cologne. She'd met him in a cafe, she confessed later, hands trembling as she unbuckled her heels. He offered to pay for Ethan's med school, she said, staring at her reflection in our bedroom mirror. I tossed her a hair tie. Generous. He called it a moral obligation. She twisted her hair into a knot, fierce and final. I told him to keep his guilt money. Our son isn't a line item. I thought of Richard's smirk in shareholder meetings, the way he'd once joked about outsourcing parenting to boarding schools. You think he'll push? Laura met my eyes in the glass. Let him try. Ethan's study breaks became our new liturgy. We'd gather on the porch at 9 p.m. sharp, him demolishing Pop-Tarts, Laura nursing chamomile tea, me pretending to read Vonnegut while he dissected his existential crises. If I flunk this genetics final, he mused, licking strawberry filling off his thumb, do I get to blame you guys? Laura choked on her tea. Only if you cite specific alleles, I said, turning a page. He lobbed a crumb at me. Dad's humor genes definitely recessive. We laughed too loud, too long. The neighbor's porch light flickered off. Friday brought rain and reckoning. I found Ethan asleep at his desk, cheeks smushed against a diagram titled Mitochondrial Inheritance. Quietly, I draped my old college sweatshirt over his shoulders, the one he'd stolen since middle school. His phone buzzed. A notification, 23andMe results, 95% processed. My throat closed. He'd ordered a test. Laura appeared in the doorway, her face draining as I pointed. We hovered like guilty ghosts, debating whether to wake him. He's 19, she whispered. It's his choice. I thought of consent forms signed in waiting rooms the 1,000 times we decided for him. Not this time. We left the phone untouched. Saturday morning, Ethan emerged squinting into the kitchen. Who makes coffee at Armageddon o'clock? Laura pushed a mug toward him. Your father's been up since 5. Something about bird watching. I glared at her over the crossword. Woodpecker migration. Ethan snorted, collapsing into a chair. You're both terrible liars. What's really going on? Laura's spoon clinked against her saucer. My pen hovered at 12 down, truth serum, 6 letters. Ethan's phone buzzed on the table. All three of us stared. 23, and me, your report is ready. The percolator gurgled. Somewhere, the woodpecker drilled on. Ethan picked up his phone, unlocked it. Click. Laura reached for my hand under the table. Ha, Ethan said. Ethan's ha hung in the air like a struck tuning fork. He blinked at his phone, thumb scrolling slowly. Laura's grip on my hand under the table felt like it might crack bone. So, he said finally, dragging out the vowel like a kid announcing a prank. Turns out I'm, 8% French? Laura's teacup clattered. Your great-grandma Louise was from Marseille, I said automatically. Family lore drilled into me over decades of Thanksgivings. Ethan smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. Guess that explains my baguette addiction. He kept scrolling. Huh? Neanderthal variants. Cool. I'm basically a caveman. And his fingers stopped. Health risks. Oh joy, I've got the Alzheimer's gene. Merry Christmas to me. Laura made a small wounded noise. That's not definitive, I heard myself say. Dr. Voice, the one I'd used when he broke his arm skateboarding. Lifestyle factors. Dad. He set the phone down carefully. Why's it say I share 0 DNA with you? The percolator chose that moment to spit its last drop. 3 sets of lungs forgot how to breathe. Laura stood abruptly, chair screeching. Oh, more coffee. Mom. Ethan's voice cracked like he was 13 again, catching us hiding his Xbox after the D in chemistry. Sit. Down. She sat. We told him in fractured sentences, Laura's clipped corporate cadence, my false starts, Ethan staring at the sugar bowl like it held a Rosetta Stone. When we finished, he pushed back from the table. Be right back. We listened to his footsteps pound upstairs. Laura reached for the abandoned phone, her finger hovering over the paternity section. He already knew, she whispered. Look, he clicked the View Relative Matches tab hours ago. A list filled the screen. Richard Donnelly, 49.9% DNA shared. Parent/child relationship. Oh, God. Laura pressed a fist to her mouth. He's known since dawn. I found him in the garage, methodically disassembling the Spider-Man fishing pole. Grease streaked his cheek where he'd swiped at tears. Need help? I asked. Got it. He inked a rusted reel. Just needed to fix something. I sat on the workbench, knees popping. Your mom's, right? You've always been terrible at asking for help. The reel clattered to the concrete. Was any of it real? Teaching me to ride a bike, the fishing trips, his voice broke. The bedtime stories? I picked up the mangled reel, remembering his 4-year-old hands struggling to thread line. You think DNA changes how many Band-Aids I stuck on your niece? How many nightmares I scared away? He scrubbed his face with a shop rag. You should have told me. You're right. I'm not yours. The words hung between us, barbed and bleeding. I waited until he looked up. The hell you aren't. Nightfall found us on a repaired dock, 3 silhouettes reflected in black water. Laura hugged Ethan's college hoodie to her chest while he skimmed stones. I always thought Dad was short, he said suddenly, whipping a flat rock. It hopped 5 times. Turns out I just got screwed by, what? A gene pool? Laura flinched. Language? I said out of habit. He laughed, real this time. Seriously, though. Richard's, 6 feet 2 inches? Where's my NBA contract? Laura exhaled shakily. You want to meet him? The next stone sank immediately. Nah, he stared at the vanishing ripples. Real fathers teach you to throw a slider. Buy you crappy root beer. Fix your dock. My chest tightened. Laura slipped her hand into mine. But, Ethan added, pulling out his phone, I'm texting him about that med school money. Free tuition's free tuition. Laura's shocked laugh echoed across the lake. The loons answered. Richard Donnelly arrived in a Tesla the color of freshly printed money. Ethan met him at the curb, arms crossed, wearing the world's okayest sun tee I'd given him for Christmas. Through the living room blinds, Laura and I watched like nervous stage parents. "He'll be fine," she said, chewing a thumbnail. "He's got your poker face," I muttered. "And your sarcasm." We hovered until the car vanished, then retreated to opposite corners of the house. Laura to reorganize the spice rack, me to inspect the gutters. By noon, we collided in the hallway 3 times, each collision quieter than the last. Ethan returned at sunset, slamming the fridge door hard enough to rattle the condiments. "Dude's a robot," he announced, grabbing a Capri Sun, his ironic comfort drink since middle school. Asked me about my GPA, my 5-year plan, then handed me a prenup. Laura dropped the cumin. What? For med school. He stabbed the straw in. Says if I flunk out, I owe him tuition. Classic Richard. I leaned against the doorway. "You sign it." Counteroffered. Told him I'd take the cash interest free if he funds a scholarship in your name. Laura's laugh burst out like a startled bird. "What?" Ethan shrugged. "Dad taught me to negotiate." Richard called that night. Laura took it in the garage, her voice rising over the buzz of the dormant freezer. "No, you listen. He's not one of your interns." "Yes," I said, grandfathered clause, get used to it. I pretended to fix the lawnmower oiling parts that didn't need it. When she hung up, her cheeks were flushed in a way I hadn't seen since she quit smoking. "He's persistent," she said. "So are you." She kicked a stray screw into the tool drawer. "Remind me why I ever found him charming." "Free coffee runs. Health insurance." Her smile faded. "I was lonely, Tom." The freezer hummed to life, swallowing the silence. On Thursday, my barber Sal became an unlikely confessor. "I Figlio, you're scalping yourself." He snatched the clippers as I butchered my neckline. "Woman trouble. Kid trouble." He spun the chair, squinting at my reflection. "The college bambino. Smart boy. Good heart." "Whatever it is," he snipped the air. "You cut this." Tapped my chest. "Not this." Tapped my temple. I left with lopsided sideburns and a deli coupon. Ethan's negotiations escalated. By Friday, our kitchen table was buried in spreadsheets. "Richard wants monthly dinners," he said, highlighting a clause. Countered with biannual Zoom calls. Laura peered over his shoulder. "Add a gift cap. Otherwise, he'll buy you a Porsche to assuage his guilt." "Already did." Ethan grinned. "No vehicles over 20K. I set down groceries." "Since when do you know market pricing?" "Grandpa Joe taught me." The name hung in the air. Laura's father, who died when Ethan was 6. My father, in every way that counted. Saturday brought rain and an unmarked envelope. Inside, 2 tickets to a Cardinals game, plus a note. "Tom, he hates hot dogs. Knows all the pitchers ERAs. You've done good." "So?" Laura found me staring at the paper. "Who's it from?" "An ally." We stood in the drizzle, watching Ethan juggle lemons for the neighbor's kids, his summer job at 15. "He'll be okay," she said. "We all will." The lemons arced gold through the gray. The Zoom call with Richard was scheduled for 7 p.m., but Ethan spent the afternoon rearranging the living room like a stage set. He angled the laptop for optimal lighting, hid Laura's throw pillows to live, laugh, love, and even borrowed my navy blazer. "It's not a job interview," I said, watching him adjust the collar. "Tell that to Robo-Dad," he shot back, smoothing his hair. Laura hovered in the doorway with a plate of lemon squares. "Should I?" "Stay," Ethan said. "But mute yourself." And no my NG. When Richard's pixelated face appeared, Ethan stiffened like a soldier at inspection. "Ethan." Richard's voice crackled through the speakers. "Good to finally connect." "Same." "Nice tie." "Brioni." "Your mother would recognize the brand." Laura's jaw clenched. For 30 minutes, they volleyed stiff pleasantries. Weather, mutual funds, the merits of electric cars. Then Richard leaned forward, his screen freezing mid-blink. "I'd like to discuss legacy planning." "Trust, equities." Ethan snorted. "Hard pass. But I will take your Marriott points." "Got a Vegas trip planned." The call ended with Richard's confused frown immortalized in freeze frame. Well, Laura asked. Ethan ripped off the blazer. Turns out I do need therapy. Laura's secret project materialized in the garage. I'd hear her shuffling boxes late at night, the rasp of packing tape, and once a muffled curse when she knocked over the ladder. You're worse than a raccoon, I said one morning, catching her red-handed with a glue gun. She shielded the project, a shadow box, scrapbook, with her body. Out. Yes, ma'am. Later, Ethan texted, Mom's in the craft aisle at Michael's. DEFCON 1. The barbecue was Sal's idea. Family needs meat fire, he declared, hauling his custom smoker into our yard. And my marinade. By noon, the neighborhood smelled like hickory and unresolved tension. Sal manned the grill, holding court with retirees while Laura arranged her deviled eggs with military precision. Ethan held court with college buddies by the cooler, their laughter a buffer against the unknown. Richard arrived unannounced. He stood at the edge of the driveway, Armani suit stark against Sal's kissed the cook apron. Laura dropped her tongs. You're not on the list, Sal said, flipping a rack of ribs. Richard ignored him, eyes scanning the crowd. Ethan. A word. Ethan froze mid-soda chick. BBQs and no suit zone. House rules. The retirees watched like it was Wimbledon. Richard rolled up his sleeves, a shockingly human gesture. I'll adapt. Sal threw an apron at his chest. Hairnet too fancy, man. I found Laura on the porch swing, her secret project wrapped in Dodgers paper at her feet. Open it, she said. Inside the box, a quilt made from Ethan's old t-shirts, Little League jerseys, band tees, the fire marshal shirt from the cabin. Stitched into the border. EST 2003, the year he was born. You hate sewing, I said. She shrugged. YouTube tutorials. The yard erupted in cheers. Richard, apron askew, had just burned a burger into charcoal. Ethan doubled over laughing. Laura rested her head on my shoulder. The quilt smelled like fabric softener and forgiveness. Richard's integration into our lives unfolded like a poorly translated instruction manual, awkward, full of misplaced steps, but oddly persistent. He began showing up unannounced Tuesday evenings with overpriced sushi, brain food for pre-med, Saturday mornings with a tennis racket, cardiovascular discipline, and once bafflingly with a bonsai tree symbolic of nurtured growth. Ethan tolerated it like a science experiment. It's like having a ChatGPT dad, he quipped, stabbing at salmon rolls. Asking about the stock market, and he's golden. Asking about Star Wars, and he blue screens. But I noticed the small things, how Richard's eyes lingered on Ethan's mannerisms, the way he'd mimic Ethan's slang, lit, SUS, with the precision of an anthropologist. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was curiosity, and curiosity could be a kind of bridge. The toolbox surfaced on a rain-spattered Thursday. I'd been searching for a Phillips head when I found it buried in the garage. My father's old Craftsman set, its red metal worn to rust at the hinges. Inside, his initials scratched into the wrench handles. JPC Joseph Patrick Callahan. A man who'd built decks, fixed carburetors, and left behind tools sharper than his words. Ethan found me polishing a socket wrench. Whoa. Grandpa's used to call this his third hand, I said, rolling the handle. Taught me to change oil before he taught me to shave. Ethan picked up a chisel, testing its weight. Kinda badass. Kinda stubborn. I smiled, remembering the Christmas Dad spent rewiring our lights instead of admitting he'd flipped the wrong breaker. But he showed up. Every damn day. Ethan set the chisel down carefully. Sounds familiar. Richard's next visit coincided with a leaky kitchen sink. He hovered as I tightened the pipes, his Ferragamo loafers an inch deep in suds. Hand me the adjustable wrench, I said. He stared blankly at the toolbox. The silver thing with the twisty end. Ah. He grabbed a pair of pliers. Ethan snorted from the doorway. Wrong tool, Robodad. Richard flushed, a rare crack in his veneer. I'll research proper technique. Later, I found him watching YouTube tutorials on his Lamborghini dashboard. Laura's quilting expanded. She commandeered the dining table, fabric scraps colonizing every surface. It's for the Veterans Hospital, she said, refusing to meet my eye. But I recognized Ethan's old Cub Scout uniform in the patches. One night, I woke to find her stitching under a halo of lamplight. You'll go blind, I murmured. She held up a square of Ethan's first tie-dye shirt. Blindness is a fair trade for remembering. We sat in silence, her needle flashing like a tiny conductor's baton. The reckoning came on Father's Day. Richard arrived with a monogram briefcase. Ethan met him on the porch, arms crossed. No gifts. It's not a gift. Richard popped the latches. Inside, stock certificates, deeds, a sealed envelope labeled Ethan James Donnelly. Laura stepped forward, her voice steel. He's not a tax deduction, Richard. I'm aware. He cleared his throat. These are apologies. In paper form, Ethan picked up the envelope. What's this? Letters. From me. To you. Starting from, he adjusted his cuffs. 2003. We stared at the stack, 19 years of unopened words. Why now? Ethan asked. Richard's gaze flicked to me. Joseph taught me timing matters. Joseph, my father. The wrench slipped from my hand, clattering. You knew him. He built my first office. Richard smoothed a wrinkle from his sleeve. Fired me once for micromanaging. The memory hit like a hammer swing. Dad coming home covered in drywall dust, ranting about a pencil-push punk who'd insulted his crew. Richard. Ethan burst out laughing. Grandpa, Joe fired you? That's the most Italian thing I've ever heard. For the first time, Richard smiled without calculation. He said I'd build better with my mouth shut. Laura's hand found mine. The porch light hummed. That night, I gave Ethan the toolbox. You sure? He asked, cradling it like a relic. Tools should be used, not worshipped. He opened the lid, tracing his grandfather's initials. What if I mess up? Then you'll fix it. I squeezed his shoulder. That's the Callahan way. He grinned. Even if I'm not a Callahan, you've always been one. The words stayed lodged in my throat, but when he hugged me, I knew he'd heard them anyway. The letters arrived in a mahogany box that smelled like regret and cedar. Ethan left it unopened for a week, perched on his dresser like a haunted artifact. Then on a Tuesday night, I caught him reading One Under a Blanket for Sheets 2004. Dear Ethan, today you turned one. I sent a savings bond. Your mother returned it. By Friday, he taped them in chronological order across his bedroom wall, a mosaic of corporate stationery and mischances. It's like Lincoln Logs for daddy issues, he joked, but his voice wavered at 2010. I saw your baseball photo. Swing's all wrong. Laura watched him through cracked doors, her hands busy with quilts, but her eyes tracking our son's face. When she finally spoke, it was over a sink full of scalding dishwater. My father left when I was 7, she said, scrubbing a pan raw. Sent a postcard from Reno once. Sign keep smiling, kiddo. I turned off the faucet. You never told me. She shrugged, a practiced motion. Some legacies aren't worth passing down. The camping trip was Richard's idea, or rather, his algorithms. Outdoor activities build rapport, see attached PDF, he'd emailed. Ethan RSVP'd with a gif of a dumpster fire. We went anyway. Sal loaned us his Winnebago, stocked with jerky and a first aid kit labeled for emotional wounds. Richard arrived in $900 hiking boots, his backpack gleaming with REI tags. Laura stayed home, claiming a quilting emergency, but slipped me a note, don't let them burn down the forest. We parked at Pine Ridge, where my dad taught me to gut trout. The air smelled the same, bug spray and impending mistakes. Tent goes here, I said, staking a claim near the fire pit. Richard consulted his phone. The survival guide suggests higher ground. Ethan tossed him a mallet. Grandpa Joe's guide says, shut up and swing. Nightfall brought bourbon and the sky hemorrhaging stars. Richard sipped single malt from a collapsible cup while Ethan and I passed a jelly jar. Letter from 2016, Ethan said abruptly. Harvard's overrated. Consider Wharton. You really thought I'd go Ivy League? Richard studied his scotch. I thought a structure mattered. A log collapsed in the fire, sending sparks fleeing upward. Why'd you send them? Ethan's voice tightened. The letters. If you knew Mom wouldn't. Because not sending them felt like surrender. Richard's cup trembled, just once. My father communicated via hedge fund reports. I thought a words might bridge the gap. Ethan snorted. Your words suck. So improve them. The challenge hung between them, smoky and sharp. I woke at dawn to find Richard crouched by the cooler, squinting at a beer can like it held encrypted data. The tab, he muttered. It's engineered poorly. Here. I popped it open, foam fizzing over his pristine boots. Your old man ever take you camping? Boardroom retreats. Marriott campsites. He wiped suds off his soul. Joseph once told me fathers are like rivets, most important when things start shaking. The memory punched through me. Dad hammering rivets into Richard's office beams, shouting over the noise. You listen to these men, rich boy? They'll teach you more than your spreadsheets. He liked you, I lied. Richard smiled. He threatened to staple my tie to a girder. Ethan emerged from the tent, hair matted with rebellion. Who's making coffee? We fumbled through it together. Richard measuring beans like lab samples. Ethan resurrecting campfire eggs. Me burning toast. The result tasted like regret and progresso. Dad's secret recipe, Ethan deadpanned. Au charbon. Richard actually laughed. We fished after breakfast. Ethan baited Richard's hook, their shoulders brushing. Grandpa Joe ever tell you about the time he caught a muskellunge? I asked. Only every third Tuesday, Ethan said. 62 inches, Richard recited. Released back into Lake Erie, 1989. We stared. I researched him, Richard admitted. After Napa, Ethan's real word. He'd have hated you. He did. Richard cast his line, the lure plinking like a dropped coin. But he loved you fiercely. That's the rivet. The lake held its breath. That night, Ethan read the final letter aloud by firelight. 2023. I'm trying. It's a harder than earnings calls. Richard stared at his hands. I'll draft a retraction. Don't. Ethan tossed the page into the flames. Just write better ones. We watched the words curl into smoke. A father's failures, a son's forgiveness, rising to meet the indifferent stars. Laura's quilting circle met in the basement of Sal's community center every Thursday. A coven of silver-haired women and one-tenth CO's wife armed with a seam ripper. I'd peek in sometimes, delivering coffee orders, half-saff, oat milk, 2 sugars, don't judge Tom, and watch her laugh at jokes I couldn't hear, her hands smoothing fabric like it was a nervous foal. They're teaching me to swear in Italian, she told me one night, her cheeks smudged with thread lint. Turns out VAFA Napoli isn't about vacation plans. The quilts piled up. Veterans Hospital, neonatal ward, the high school silent auction. But the one she kept hidden, Ethan's t-shirt mosaic, stayed draped over our bed like a phantom limb. Sal's community center was a time capsule of wood paneling and second chances. I started mentoring there on Tuesdays, teaching auto repair to kids whose dads were more rumor than fact. Why's this carburetor look like my Xbox? Asked Marcus, a wiry 15-year-old with a chip on his shoulder the size of Detroit. Because both overheat if you ignore the vents, I said, handing him a wrench. He called me Mr. C, which sounded better than Tom. We bonded over oil changes and Oreos, Marcus rolling his eyes when I mentioned torque specs but scribbling notes anyway. My uncle says Hondas are for pussies, he muttered once, elbow deep in a Civic's engine. Your uncle ever try rebuilding one in January? He smirked. Fair. Laura said it was penance. Sal called it legacy building. I just like the smell of grease without ghosts. Richard's fundraiser was a spreadsheet disguised as a bake sale. He commandeered the community center kitchen, barking into his AirPods while arranging gluten-free brownies into tax brackets. We'll tier donations by projected ROI, he announced, labeling trays equity, bonds, and high-yield philanthropy. Sal stormed in, waving a wooden spoon like a broadsword. Fancy, man. My Nona's biscotti ain't no high-yield. They're holy. Ethan mediated, texting live updates. Ethan, Robodad just called sprinkles non-essential particulate. Send help. By noon, they'd compromised Richard's QR code donation plaques next to Sal's handwritten nutritional love, $2. The Harmony Falls Town Fair was equal parts cotton candy and chaos. Laura's quilts hung in the gymnasium beside 4-H piglets and crocheted toilet paper cozies. My auto shop kids had a booth demoing engine overhauls, oil changes for college funds, and Richard's bake sale table gleamed like a NASDAQ ticker. Ethan manned the dunk tank, heckling the line. $3 to sink the future of medicine. Come on, Mrs. Kowalski. You've hated me since I TP'd your azaleas. Laura paced like a general, adjusting quilt angles on my collar. Breathe, she ordered. You breathe, I shot back. She kissed me, quick and fierce. Later. The crisis hit at 2:37 p.m. Mrs. Donahue, town librarian and chief gossip, squinted at Laura's quilt. This looks like Ethan's old soccer jersey. Did you repurpose it? Laura froze, a deer in craft fair headlights. Richard materialized, balancing a tray of aggressive growth lemon squares. An astute observation. Each piece represents a memory, valuation increasing with nostalgia. Mrs. Donahue blinked. So it's art. Priceless art, Richard said, handing her a square. Free sample. She bought 2 quilts. At dusk, we gathered at Sal's smoker, grease and sugar clinging to the twilight. Ethan slumped in a lawn chair, dunk tank hair plastered to his forehead. Robo-Dad raised $6,000. I'm officially a charity case. Scholarship case, Richard corrected, wiping powdered sugar off his Ferragamos. Marcus approached, trailing oil stains. Mr. C, that Civic's purring like my ex's cat. When's lesson 2? Laura laced her fingers with mine. The fairground lights flickered on, string by string, stitching the dark into something warm. Ethan's dorm room smelled like industrial cleaner and unmet expectations. Laura hovered by the mini-fridge, wiping invisible smudges with a disinfectant wipe. You'll need groceries by Thursday, she said too brightly. And maybe a small vacuum. Ethan flopped onto his twin XL bed, Spider-Man comforter clashing with a beige walls. Mom? Breathe. I leaned in the doorway, watching Richard calculate square footage like he was appraising a condo. You could loft the bed, he offered. Maximize workspace. Or I could not live in a bunker, Ethan said, tossing a stress ball at the ceiling. The move-in guide had warned about emotional transitions. They hadn't mentioned XO's diagramming optimal sock drawer layouts. We left him at dusk, his new roommate blasting death metal down the hall. Laura kept it together until the parking lot. Then, staring at Ethan's abandoned passenger seat, still littered with gas station receipts and guitar picks, she crumpled. He forgot his toothbrush, she whispered, clutching a CVS bag like a lifeline. Richard cleared his throat. I've scheduled weekly check-ins. Mondays at 7 p.m. He'll ignore them, I said. I've budgeted for 80% noncompliance. Laura's laugh hiccuped into a sob. The house that night was a museum of absence. Laura rearranged the quilting room. Richard strategized at the kitchen island, his laptop glow, our new nightlight. I escaped to the garage, where Ethan's bike hung like a suspended cord. Marcus texted at 11:03 p.m., Mr. C, Civic's making a noise like my ex's mixtape. Help? I found him under the hood, bathed in iPhone light. Timing belt's loose, I said, handing him a wrench. You miss him already, huh? The truth sat heavy as a lug nut. Like a limb. He tightened the belt, voice muffled by engine. My pops split when I was 8. Still look for him sometimes. Dumb, right? I thought of Richard's spreadsheets, Laura's CVS vigil. No, just human. Laura's quilting went nocturnal. I'd wake to the hum of her sewing machine, lullaby of stubbornness. One night, I found her spiraling, floral patterns devolving into abstract chaos. It's for the community center, she lied, thread snarling. I unplugged the machine. Who's it really for? Her fingers worried a scrap of Ethan's baby blanket. Me. We sat in the dark, her head on my shoulder, the quilt a bridge between then and now. Richard's check-ins evolved. He replaced spreadsheets with poorly researched memes, sending them at 7:01 p.m. sharp. Richard, image of cartoon owl, late-night study fuel? Ethan, that's a meth lab. Richard, disregard. Progress in pixels. At Sal's urging, I took Marcus fishing. He baited hooks with practiced cynicism. This your way of data NG me? No. My way of getting free labor. I nodded at the tangled line. He smirked, untangling it with surgeon hands. My uncle says men who talk feelings deserve catfish bites. Your uncle ever catch anything bigger than a cold? The bobber dipped. Marcus yelped, reeling in a perch. His grin outshone the sunset. Ethan came home for Thanksgiving, smelling of coffee shops and independence. He'd pierced his ear, swapped hoodies for flannel, and forgotten how to use the dishwasher. It's temporary, Laura murmured, watching him devour pie. Richard frowned. The earring or the attitude? The being gone, she said. We washed dishes shoulder to shoulder, a choreography of letting go. Snow fell on New Year's Eve. Ethan video call from a dorm party, shouting over bass. Dad? Tell Robodad his memes suck less. Richard froze mid-old lang syne, champagne sloshing. I've hired a consultant. Laura kissed his cheek. Welcome to the family. At midnight, I stepped onto the porch. Marcus's Civic idled at the curb, bass thumping. He tossed me a Coke. No resolutions, just noise. We sat on a hood, frost seeping through jeans, and watched the neighborhood erupt in glow sticks and grace. Fatherhood isn't a title. It's the showing up, the listening, the knowing when to hold the line and when to let it run. Somewhere, Ethan laughed. Somewhere, my father's tools waited. Somewhere, a quilt grew. I stayed. 10 years unspooled like thread through a needle's eye. I found myself on a folding chair in Sal's community center, now Marcus's community center, watching my grandson gum a teething ring shaped like a wrench. The wall behind us displayed Laura's first quilt, its t-shirt squares faded to relics. Beneath it, a plaque, Joseph Grandpa Joe Callahan Memorial Auto Shop. He's got your grip, Richard said, adjusting the baby's Cardinals cap. At 73, he'd traded Brioni for dad jeans, and a title even he couldn't monetize, Papa Rich. Ethan burst through the door, stethoscope slung like a punk rock necklace. Sorry. Skifter on note. Prioritizing lives over punctuality, Richard noted. Efficient. Laura swatted him with a crocheted oven mitt. He means, we missed you. The occasion. Marcus's ribbon cutting for the new vocational wing. My old protege stood at the podium, tattoos peeking under his suit sleeves, addressing kids who called him sir without irony. Mr. C taught me engines ain't the only things need tune-ups, he said, nodding at me. The crowd clapped. I clutched the wrench keychain Ethan gave me at his med school graduation for fixing hearts. Later, at our cabin, now Ethan's wellness retreat, we gathered under the oak that had weathered our storms. Ethan's wife, Mira, rocked the baby while Laura fussed over a charred salmon. Still can't believe you married a therapist, I muttered, flipping burgers. Ethan grinned. Someone's got to dissect Richard's spreadsheets. The baby cooed, grabbing Richard's pinky. He froze, terrified and tender, then hummed a lullaby even Laura didn't recognize. At dusk, Laura unfolded the quilt on the dock. Faded t-shirts whispered secrets, Fire Marshal, World's okayest son, Bioethics final survivor. For the little guy, she said, tucking it around Myra's shoulders. Mira smiled. He'll need stories. We've got plenty. The loons called. The baby slept. Richard found me at the cooler, fumbling with a root beer. Need a hand. I popped the tap. Still engineering better methods. Iterating, he said, toasting the sunset. We watched Ethan teach Marcus's twins to skip stones, their laughter skipping farther than the rocks. He's a good father, Richard said. Had good teachers. The lake held our silence, forgiving his old tools. That night, as fireflies scribble the dark, Laura pressed her cheek to my shoulder. Regrets. I thought of DNA tests and dock repairs, of Marcus calling every Father's Day, of Richard crying when the baby said, Papa, just one. I kissed her temple. Should have bought stock in root beer. She laughed, the sound weaving into the quilt, the water, the rusted toolbox waiting in Ethan's garage. Legacy isn't blood. It's the work, the showing up, the stubborn, splendid act of stitching loose ends into something that holds.